Today we have with us a very special guest. It's a guest from Fazal's side, and we wanted to spice things up a bit because so far all our videos have been directed towards culture shock and how an international student views culture shock. But I think before we began this podcast, me and Dominic over here, our guest is Dominic, and we were discussing about how intra-city culture shock makes a big deal, about how like intra-city culture shock, being a person from New York and pursuing his own undergrad in New York, how intra-city culture shock is going to be a big difference in the way he viewed pursuing undergrad studies over there. But at the same time, I think a short synopsis of what we are going to discuss in today's episode is how Dominic really views investing. I was just checking his portfolio right now. He has an impressive portfolio, and the way he has an impressive portfolio with the way he invests into stocks and in cryptocurrencies and NFTs. This is like the biggest thing that's screaming all over the news right now. And I think we wanted to discuss this.
I guess it's the only good thing happening in 2021 is to do things with.
But we need to recognize that it's important to identify the bull run, invest in the bull run itself and try to squeeze out as much as profits as possible, because I think I'll debate more over this right now as we discuss over it. I think Fazal, it's important that you introduce your friend over here.
Right. Yeah. So Dominic, there's a little fun story from me, how our friendship actually began. I know Dominic since the very first freshman year of architecture, and we didn't talk as much as that time because there were different studios, and he was from a different studio. I was from the other side of the studio, and because we had different groups, different classes within the same studio, there was not much conversation. But through Marcelo, which is also one of the other guests that you would see in the other episodes, he was like the bridge to connect our friendship almost. And I have been closer to Dominic more so since the last semester. And that was the sophomore year of architecture. And me, Dominic, Marcelo, and my other friend, Jonah, we're just like buddies all the time. And every weekend, we try to hang out. We try to have fun. And that's a little bit about Dominic. That's how our friendship began. But Dominic would be the best person to introduce himself, I'm sure.
Well then. Hello, my name is Dominic. I'm from upstate New York, which if you guys have a hard time grasping that idea, it's 2 hours drive away from New York City itself. That's where I'm from. I've lived there most of my life, and now I go to school with Fazal in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, so he goes to University at Buffalo. In case people missed that, University at Buffalo. We're doing architecture. We're in the same year, struggling through the same pain. Sometimes more or less between both of us, and we try to help each other whenever needed.
Moving on, I think I wanted to begin with one small question. Now that before we began this podcast, you began with this small intention that you wanted to pursue your higher academics in a city. Okay. But then this comes in retrospect. New York is something viewed as a city for each and every person. So how would you view culture shock from the way having come from upstate New York to the way you're pursuing in University at Buffalo? How would you view it any differently from a person like an international student? An international student takes a lot of thought in trying to go for the right institutions. What was your thought behind having chosen University at Buffalo? Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So, like I was saying, I grew up in kind of this small town mentality in upstate New York. I think that the town that I'm from, it only has about 15,000 people, which is not small, but it's not super large. And so growing up there, a lot of people that I know have always been really wanting to stay here and not leave this bubble. But I've never really been like that. I've always been the kind of person that likes to think about the greater picture and the world around us. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to my college years, I decided that I want to go somewhere that isn't too far away from my parents, but is still somewhere where I can kind of experience independent life and see all these different cultures. And
Right.
so, yeah, I chose Buffalo mainly because it offered that kind of bigger city without being too far from my home.
Yep,
It's
yep.
about a 5-hour drive.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I almost get jealous when Dominic goes for the 2-day trip back to home, because I cannot fly 24 hours back to Dubai or Muscat, for that matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why Dominic is a little lucky. I'm sure like location was, I think, one of the major reasons why you chose UB, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh, I should have considered weather conditions in Buffalo.
Yes, I should have anticipated all the snow and all the wind. It's
Right.
great.
I remember you told me about you had a different course in the freshman year for the first year of your schooling in UB itself. And then you shifted to architecture from the second year onwards, right? So what was the journey of you transferring to architecture? Like, what was the reason? And why did you pick architecture among the other courses?
Okay. I'll be honest here. So I've always had a fascination with like building homes and things like that. It's run in my family. A lot of my family members have been like carpenters or like contractors. They do work like that.
Right.
And I've always had a fascination with it, but I personally felt like I wasn't good enough to be an architect. I didn't think I was able to draw well enough. And so when I went to school, I decided to do civil engineering, and I thought it was close enough. It's more about like figuring out the mathematics behind building bridges and highways and things like that. And so I got into it, and I realized that first semester that it really wasn't what I wanted to do. It was more math and physics based rather than like expressionary. You're not able to express your own ideas. It's stick to the code. You know? And so I decided to switch to architecture really to just give it a shot and see what happened. And luckily enough, I've been able to get through it somehow. So I'm very happy with what I'm doing now.
Right. And
I think one thing I wanted to say, one thing what I really appreciate the system in USA at least is that you do not punish the choices that you make back when you're 17 or 18 years old. You do not punish yourself for whatever you chose. It's not the same rest of the world, at least. Whatever you chose, the major that you choose, say for example, in my case, I chose computer science and applied mathematics. I have to stick with it by virtue, by hook or crook for the next 4 years. At least for you guys, you guys have the flexibility to change the major within your freshman year, and which is something which I wish I had. But I think I do not regret my choice either way. So it's like, I just wanted to say that, yeah.
Yeah, surprising enough, actually, that's why you see a lot of Indian students coming to US in general, is because you have that flexibility, right? You can just take the basic courses of the first year, and you can graduate the first year, and then for the second year, you can take a more mature decision for that matter, right? So I feel like part of the reason of more Indians coming each year to US is also about having the flexibility, which is something which you can still do in India, but it's not the ideal step to, shift or stream or shift your course. So yeah, that's like a major academic difference between doing your courses in India versus doing your courses in America. But I know you told about how you took the step of choosing architecture and picking architecture, but much reasoning to picking architecture was also what you wanted to be in the future. And you told me how you wanted to get into the real estate business and become a broker eventually. And the idea was more of being a businessman into architecture than a designer into architecture, something like that. So what was the reasoning behind that, and what are your goals picking architecture?
Yeah. So that's a good question. When I was growing up, I was telling you about how like my family has always been into the carpentry and the contracting. I had one of my uncles who owned a lot of properties in like our town. And so what I would do with him every weekend is I'd go with him and help him clean up his properties and collect the rent and all that. And I was always fascinated by this idea that he's getting paychecks from all these people every week just to like live in their homes, And that's kind of what I kind of want to do. Like, I feel like to get above that level of having to work every day of your life to, meet your needs, you can do these things in advance to kind of set yourself up for later in life where you can just collect those checks without having to do anything.
Right.
And so doing the real estate is kind of something that helps you get there. That's something I'm interested in.
Right.
Right. I think the way I see it, real estate is one of the most profitable businesses, and the way and having an eye for a product, having an eye for design, it's gonna either way. It's gonna either way help you and make you understand how a product is viewed. Say, for example, in this case, the house, how a house is viewed. And I think perhaps business, being able to understand the business out of it it just keeps you on the way of earning a realistic career altogether.
Right.
The way I see it. So yeah.
Yeah, I have
real estate is not as popular. Real estate is not as popular in where we live because it's restricted to people over here. People of the citizens over here, since we are not citizens of the Middle East, we cannot relate with it. But I think it's a very profitable career back anywhere else except here.
Right. Yeah, I have a little follow-up question to that. Is that do you think it is, at least in the age that we are living through and learning through architecture, and it's getting more and more saturated as years pass by, but do you think it's more profitable in terms of career-wise or financially being an architectural designer? Or do you think it's a better choice of getting into the business of architecture, being a real estate broker, just in America, not generally?
Yeah. So in America, I would definitely say the developer side is going to be more profitable because you're kind of, instead of like having this middleman when you're the architect, you're kind of making the plans and that's your final product.
Right.
When you're the developer, you're the one actually building the homes that people buy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're kind of like bringing it to the customer. That gives you more value, if that makes sense.
Right. And have you ever thought of how you're going to begin the journey of real estate, or do you think it's going to be like automatic based as you go?
I think I definitely want to finish my degree in architecture first to have that basis.
Right.
And then from there, they have graduate programs, they have certifications that you have to do to start getting into that field.
Got it.
I think it's pricking me to really question you, which is precisely why we invited you to this podcast, was like to spice things up. Was why really, what is the conviction that you have that makes you think with the next couple of years, if you continue investing into this in the cryptocurrency space, that makes you completely independent in this? What are the things? What's the creative process? What's the calculation process that you involve yourself in to make you think, I can just
have a living out of
career out of this. Yeah, make a living out of it, make a career out of it. It's like, more than, I'm curious about that.
First of all, congratulations on trying to achieve that, because that is, you're already like the top 10% of like successful people, I feel like.
At least for a student.
At least for a student. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
So the first step is just kind of like, you have to understand the space, and you have to like, before you put your money into anything, you should know like your own belief if you think it's valuable. Don't just like listen to what other people say. Like, you have to do your own research and really think, is this something that will be profitable or important in the future? And after I did my own research, I thought that this cryptocurrency space that is just beginning to emerge now really will be something in the future that's very, very popular. And so if you get into it early, you're really just like, even now, we're still super, super early into everything. So you should use that advantage while you still have it, because you're not going to have it in the future,
Right.
But
okay, I wanted to ask a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Since I have put in some area of I have in my own capacity, I have invested into this area. Okay. My question is, Bitcoin right now is consuming a lot of energy. Okay, I'm sure you know this a lot. I'm sure you know this as well. It's consuming a lot of energy. For which reason it will dip in the price, right? Okay.
Right.
This is synonymous with other cryptocurrencies as well. It will dip in the price because it's consuming a lot of energy, and we need to have some sustainable solution to this. How do you think you'll approach this question?
This is
In case you have research on this, yeah.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Fazal? Or
no. Go ahead. I
Okay,
just want you to speak everything about Bitcoin because I'm like a dumb person. I'm like a born baby to this. So
okay, well, I think that the issue with energy consumption is kind of a short-term problem. The thing with any cryptocurrency, especially like Bitcoin, if we're talking about that, you have miners that have to actually mine the Bitcoin for it to be usable. And to mine this Bitcoin, to make it very, very simple, you have to have a computer that does a series of calculations. And if it does the correct computations, it will produce the Bitcoin and it will mine them. And so you need a lot of energy to do that because your machines are usually running 24/7. But I think in the future, just in general, we're going to turn towards more green energy that it isn't such a problem. Right. I think the price of Bitcoin and that kind of thing is more associated with like, there's these general major cycles in the market. They're called like the crypto cycles. And by following those, you can kind of project where the price will go in the future.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, like I was saying, it's about understanding how the tokenomics of whatever like cryptocurrency you're talking about works. So for Bitcoin's case, it has its own cycles that correlate to the Bitcoin halving. Do you guys, either of you know what Bitcoin halving is?
No, I personally
didn't
don't.
come back to that, no.
Okay. So to make it simple, every couple of years, it's like every 4 years, the price that you get for successfully mining a Bitcoin will be slashed in half. Or no, wait.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah, it will be slashed in half. And so when this happens, it kind of de-incentivizes the mining of the Bitcoin. Yeah, when that happens, it gets more and more incentive to mine the Bitcoin, and then that will really increase the price. So right now where we are, we're kind of at the end of what was the bull cycle. We just had a Bitcoin halving in 2021, which was last year. So that was kind of the beginning of this bull cycle where our price in Bitcoin shot up so high. We were at like 60,000 for one. And now we're getting towards the end of that bull cycle as we head into this bear cycle, which will keep going for like the next couple of years. So
the price will keep dipping.
Yeah.
The price will keep dipping, right?
October, that like will start to be in that bear cycle. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Oh, can you say that again? I could not catch you.
Yep. So it's like speculated that around October is when we'll really hit into the bear cycle, which is where we'll have a lot of trouble with the prices of these cryptos.
Right. I think by this time you could already see the gap of the knowledge of cryptocurrencies we have versus the knowledge that Dominic carries.
I don't. This is something speculation I had in mind. I could be wrong as well, and I'm no expert on this area. It's just a couple of buzzwords, just a couple of buzzwords which we are just discussing all the way here.
Right.
Anyway,
but tell us about your journey. How did you begin investing just in general, and then investing in stocks or investing in cryptocurrencies? How did that journey go for you?
Okay, so it kind of just ties into my whole personality, like I was mentioning earlier, where I've always had this idea of wanting to be able to earn money without having to necessarily give up my time to a job or etc. And I've always I've looked to the guidance of a lot of people that have come before me to how to achieve that goal. And one person that I really, really found helpful, that I would highly recommend anybody to read his book. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And it's by Ramit Sethi. I think I'm saying his name right. He's also Indian. But yes, he writes this book and he writes it for different languages, different cultures, different areas. So you can find one that's specific towards India. But he'll teach you the certain investment accounts, the certain like ways to go about it. And the biggest thing that he talks about, which I've always taken to heart now, is kind of automate you're investing and stuff, and then just forget about it. You don't have to like actively work at it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you make like $100 in a day at your job or whatever.
Right.
If you just take 30% of that or $30 and just invest it without even like seeing it into your bank account, just have it go right into investing. You don't have to do anything and you're already building towards that wealth, you know? So things like that.
Okay, just a small, I just wanted to ask this because when you mention automate your investing, right? I am not clear with what you mentioned, automation, the automate part. Is it just like you invest in something and you just leave it alone, or you're just, because investing is a space where it requires constant reading. It requires a lot of literature to be read to understand the nitty-gritties of a stock being picked, right? I wanted to know what you think about that because I haven't read the book. Perhaps you might know better on this.
Yeah. So the problem with trying to pick one individual stock is that you can't predict where it's going to go. And what he talks about, and which I should have mentioned, is investing into broad market ETFs. So instead of investing in just buying a share of Apple or a share of Google, you can invest in the entire stock market. And then when the entire economy does good, you're making money. It's increasing in value rather than just having to worry about that one specific company, you know?
Got it. Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
And research has shown that instead of trying to time the market, because nobody can predict where it's going to go, just investing on repeat every single week, no matter what the market is doing, will get you the results that you want.
Right. So like basically you're trying to say like the investment in stocks should be a long-term plan. Like is that the ideal outlook of investing in stocks?
Exactly. Yes.
Right. Okay. Got it. So when was the first time that you actually began investing in stocks?
I began at the beginning of 2020.
Okay. Right.
So not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Right. Yeah. And how did you eventually graduate to investing in Bitcoin?
Right. It was probably around the beginning of this year, around 2021. So
right.
I wanted to kind of expand and mess around, if you will, with some other things in the space. And I stumbled upon cryptocurrency and did my research, and I thought that it was really a great opportunity. So
right. We had an interesting dialogue between us with respect to Bitcoin, the future of Bitcoin, as well as future of cryptocurrencies for that matter, and whatever limited limited knowledge the both of us had. Yeah. Knowing what you know now and knowing what you could have known then, how would you? I think you don't know. This is not like you want to give advice or something, but what would you have done differently? What would you have done differently now that knowing what you know now and what you could have done then, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, one thing that I definitely learned, just to give context to the whole situation. So I began investing at the beginning of 2020, like I said. And at that point in time, the market was doing really, really good because it was before the pandemic began and all of that. And then as soon as the coronavirus pandemic began in March, everything just plummeted. And one thing that I did that I am very, very mad about is I sold a lot of what I owned at those bottom marks, you know? And instead, I really wish I had just put more in, because if I had stayed there, it would have been a much better recovery. But I guess the moral of that is to don't be afraid when prices go down. Be aggressive. And if you have more that you're willing to put in, don't be afraid to, you know.
Do you invest in any other cryptocurrencies other than Bitcoin, or is Bitcoin your mainstream right now?
Yeah, I do invest in other ones, but I try to invest in projects that make sense and have a real goal and a real use case in the world. So something like a Cardano, or Ethereum, different things like that have actual use cases. I try not to go to something like a Dogecoin, which has no real use case, you know. It's just the price increases because people want it to, and that's not the best idea. You have to constantly check and make sure that it's okay. Whereas with these other ones, you know that it's going to increase over time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's
something which has a like you mentioned, a use case, something which has a vision. Like Cardano has a very good vision. It's backed by pretty good. It's backed by Ethereum co-founder itself, backed by Ethereum former co-founder of Ethereum. Even Ethereum is pretty good. Okay, I should not say much because everybody knows about Ethereum, so it's okay. So yeah, I like the way where you mentioned where something that has long-term vision rather than just invest in Dogecoin and just invest in a meme.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like so stepping into the next part of the conversation, talking about NFTs in general, and it's a new thing, and it got a sudden hype in early this year in 2021, and it is a thing that was existing, but it had a sudden spike. There was a hype to NFTs, and I'm definitely unknown to this. And the first time I heard about NFTs was actually Dominic. So, and he introduced the entire topic of NFTs, a non-fungible token. So, give us a little introduction of first what is NFTs and how it got a sudden spike this year, especially.
Yeah, I'm not a full expert on it. I'm still doing my own research, but it's essentially you're owning a collectible. Kind of like when you go and collect your Pokemon cards or things like that. You're owning these collectible objects, and you can sell them to each other on marketplaces, different things like that, and collect them. And they allow people to kind of connect more with communities of fans, just like Pokemon, just like other things like that. Right. So, yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I want to add on this. I think now, since Dominic just paused for, I want to add something on this. Like, NFTs going against the whole onus of, like even it works on the same. It works on the same onus of blockchain, from what I know, from what I understand, because like the whole decentralization principle where everybody investing in the market are agreeing to that non-fungible token, to that product's value, that's going against the whole idea of blockchain changing the world. It's not changing the world. We're trying to invest in something that is completely having just monetary value, but like psychologically a big hype, the way I see it. Yeah.
I would agree. I think that they don't, the hype that comes from them is always going to happen with anything new, but it's all about like fundamentally, is this going to change how we interact with each other? Is this going to make a difference in how we collect items or show our support for communities, you know?
Correct.
Which I think that NFTs will do.
Right. Yeah, I think to close the discussion on NFTs, basically, NFTs is not really adding any value. It's a psychological hype. It's like, I remember, since I follow basketball a lot. Are you a basketball fan? I wanted to ask you, since you're from New York, maybe you watch New York Knicks or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like remember when basketball cards became a big deal? Like owning a LeBron James, rookie card was like, right now it's being sold for $1 million or something. I'm not sure, but like it's like owning that psychological hype, having just a card which is having that, just trying to mimic that hype in your head, that's creating a whole value altogether. It's like, say for example, I have a whole Beyblade collection at home. Perhaps if I sell it right now, I can monetize it to a good value inside eBay.com or eBay, any eBay service. I was just thinking that. I mean, I think NFTs have always been there. It's just that once the NFTs have been there. Now that I think of it, it's been there since the inception of eBay. It's just that we derived a term for it and involved blockchain into it, and it became a big deal altogether. So
I have an interesting question. Considering Dominic Dominic's background of being from the architecture school, and so architecture is basically more of a design school, right? At least a little bit for us, at least. And because the NFTs are more focused, especially right now, are more focused to the visual artists and the designers. What do you think? What do you
that's a
think
good
about?
question.
What do you think about that space? What do you think about artists and visual artists, especially us as architecture designers, me and you? Do you think for us is this going to be a new stream of earning for architects?
That's a good question.
I think it definitely could be. An NFT can be almost anything.
Right.
So using that space as architects or as designers and kind of taking advantage of that. I know one new piece of news that I heard like earlier this week. If you guys have ever heard of the artist Ron English, I don't know if you guys have, but Ron English is kind of like this. He's a painter that does really unique sculptures and online art, and he's begun to sell them as NFTs, and it's earning him money to monetize his art in more ways than just making it in real life and selling it to a museum, etc.
Right.
So it's a new way to increase your value of your own work and get yourself exposed.
Right, absolutely. So now that we had a pretty detailed discussion about stepping into Bitcoin and stocks and a little bit of NFTs as well, we talked about all the good stuff. We also talked about how the energy gets exploited and everything. But what do you think are like? Give me like a few merits, a long-term merit about investing in general, and demerits of investing in either of these platforms. Investing in stocks or investing into cryptocurrencies or NFTs.
What do you mean by merits?
Merits in the sense like what is like the long-term advantage? Do you think? Okay, maybe like the better way to ask this question would be, what is going to be the long-term advantage for us? Because I think one of the most important ideas in relation to cryptocurrencies or for right now is that, remember the early days of internet, how people were saying that this is all hoax. Internet is just going to be a big fail in our life, and it's not something we should use. This was in the early 2005s and early 2006 and everything. And now we are in 2021 and internet is something we cannot live without. So do you think cryptocurrencies is going to have that big impact on our life that it has so many advantages? It's the part of our life now. And what do you think could be a disadvantage stepping into investing in cryptocurrencies or NFTs? That's a very long question.
It is. And I feel like it's a little bit hard because you need to kind of have the foresight to think about what the future will bring. Different people will give you a different answer to this question.
Yeah, just your thought.
Me personally, I feel like there's more advantages than disadvantages. If we're able to kind of like, decentralize the way we live our lives without having to worry so much about our privacy, I think it is definitely a step in the right direction towards being more financially free, economically free, et cetera, et cetera. As far as a disadvantage, I think that all of these companies have to improve on their user interfaces. This is something that I know Fazal has a big interest in, but I think that it's such a concept that most people can't wrap their heads around that we need to improve that and make it something that's more approachable. Even if that means making it look more like a traditional banking system or whatever. It's important to make people feel comfortable with your product if you want it to make any sort of success.
Right. So that's like the thing to improve. You're trying to say.
Right.
Making it easier for the layman to understand.
I think from this whole podcast, we can gather that it's hard for even me or any of us to understand fully what's going on in the space. So bringing that to a more understandable situation will be much better.
Yeah.
Right. Honestly, this is my knowledge about Bitcoin, to be honest. I started reading an article. By the time I reached to the third paragraph or the fourth paragraph, it becomes...
yawn.
Yeah, I yawn, but then it starts to become a coding language. It starts to look like HTML language or something like that. So yeah, but then I feel like it's important, as you mentioned, for to be approachable to more people. The user interface, or you might know better what that is called exactly. But yeah, especially for Indian audience, investing in general, especially at the age that you are investing, is something you would not see. It's not common, especially at the moment. It's getting some spike. It's getting some attention, but in the Indian space or in the Indian demographic, investing in cryptocurrency or NFT itself is like a whole new thing that needs to be explored, almost like so. And coming from that entire idea, what do you think? How do you think a student, a student in general, should begin investing? Where should they begin from, or what knowledge should they first obtain in order to begin investing in general? And just thinking about, I know the entire idea. I realized the entire idea was about being financially free eventually, right? Investing less time and having more gains.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the takeaway for the students, and how should students begin investing for the Indian audience, for me, just me in general? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, number one, don't be afraid to start, because that's always the problem that happens to almost anything you want to do in life. Just don't be afraid to start. Put a little bit of money in and be okay with making a few mistakes, but really just get your toes wet. Try to understand what's going on around you. They even have websites now where you can pretend invest, where you like invest in certain companies or whatever without having to actually put your own money into it. Mm-hmm. So just start to read articles, try to understand what you're looking at. And then once you get there, like, you're already halfway there. Just like I was saying earlier, begin your automation and let the money do its work for you, Right. You have earned it. You might as well spend it the way that you want to,
Right. I'm sure Dominic has made it sound too easy, but it's definitely not that.
He's so modest. He's so soft-spoken, man. He's so modest.
Yes. This is.
He made it sound he made it sound like you just go have a pizza or something.
But that's how it should be, shouldn't it? It shouldn't be, oh, you need to study the PEs and all these intense metrics. You don't need to know all of that, Mm-hmm. If you don't want to get into these really intense, like options, stock trading, all of this really intense stuff, that's when people think of stock trading, that's what they think of. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can make it simple by making choices to be more broad,
Right.
And that's kind of how I've chosen it. Don't let it take over your life,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Do you think a student can maintain the balance? Do you think we should monitor it daily in order to see what's going up, what's going down, what stocks are increasing, where the losses are? Do you think it should be a daily thing?
To be honest, I don't. I think maybe once a week, read an article about how the economy is doing as a whole, but
right.
You really want to be holding on to what you have and just buy and hold. That's the strategy that everyone says. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, including like tax reasons and all that. I'm not going to get into, but
yeah,
it's just psychologically, it's better to just take yourself away from it and just let it do its thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good insight that you mentioned. Psychologically take yourself away from it, because once you get into it, it's like a whole new spiral. You will just not come out of it.
Right.
It's like it comes in the way of your relationships. It comes in the way of you.
You get addicted almost.
You get addicted. You might just think, okay, my friend is not earning any money. He might be useless. So just leave him aside and let's just focus on earning money. It could be something along the lines. So yeah, I like the way you put it.
So it's like you have to have the mindset, the ideal mindset of being financially free, and not just investing because the other people are doing, because the world is racing ahead and they are ahead of you or something, right? It's for yourself being financially free. And also I like how you also said that you invest in cryptocurrencies, in those which had vision, right? So it's about having moral between them. It's about having vision. And this sort of thinking, I think, is something people might not realize is also important maybe to take forward. Do you have any last comments for the audience, Dominic?
I think that my only comment would be to do what makes you happy in all factors in life. And if that for you is to be financially independent in the future, then take that first step. Don't be afraid. It's not as intimidating as it may seem.
Yeah. And in case you're not able to do it, I'll give you Dominic's links and you can contact him. And then Dominic can also start earning from there. There you go.
Yeah. I would love to give anybody any advice if you'd like to reach out.
Right. Right. So thank you so much, Dominic, for joining us today. And I know it's a different time zone for you. And it was actually hard to get you on the podcast because Dominic is such a busy man. It's really hard to get him. It's hard to get him on the Zoom call. And for 45 minutes, it's a miracle. So right. So thank you for coming to the podcast. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And Abhinav, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I want to thank from my side because since we are still in our infancy of our podcast, we are still in our infancy, and I think you just saying yes, I think that's like already flattering for us, and you coming to the podcast in trying to. I think one thing we need to address before we finish our podcast is that the culture of trying to pursue a side hustle or a job for that matter doesn't exist in our culture. It doesn't exist in Indian culture where you are expected to pursue a job until you get a professional degree. But then I think knowing that you're working already, you're working somewhere right now, and I think you taking out your time for this podcast is something very flattering for us.
Yeah.
We would like to thank you for that. More importantly, we just want to thank you for that.
Yeah. And thank you everyone watching the podcast on YouTube and hearing it on multiple different platforms. And we will catch you up next week with a new guest. And until then, see you and bye-bye.